afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Doing Justice Brings Joy. Um, Today, I'm going to discuss with you some aspects of the SAVE Act that are not necessarily getting a whole lot of attention. And we're also going to be discussing an update on the Nolan Wells case. I'll invite William to join me in just a few minutes with that update. But we're going to start out today discussing the SAVE Act. And the question we're going to answer, or attempt to answer, is when identity changes, should women bear a greater burden to exercise a constitutional right to vote? The SAVE Act requires women who are married or divorced to go through some logistical hoops that men, whether they're married, divorced, or single, don't have to consider. So today we're exploring a question that sounds legal on the surface, but is actually deeply personal. When a woman's identity changes through marriage, divorce, remarriage, or survival, should she bear the greater documentation burden to exercise a constitutional right? This conversation has emerged along debates over voter registration and proof of citizenship laws. But we're not going to focus on this from a partisan perspective. This is about women. It's about names. It's about our identity. And it's about what happens when government systems assume that who you are today should perfectly match who you were decades ago. Because for many women, that's not how life works. I want you to imagine a woman named Sarah. She was born Sarah Johnson. At 23, she marries and becomes Sarah Smith. 10 years later, she divorces. A few years after that, she remarries and becomes Sarah Williams. Professionally, she may have built a career under one name. Her degree from the university may be under another. Her Social Security records may reflect multiple changes. Her children's records may carry different surnames. Now ask yourself this: which of those names is the real Sarah? The answer, of course, is all of them. Each name tells part of her story. Yet many government systems prefer simple answers. One name, one record, one identity. Life, especially for women, is rarely that simple. Here's something we don't talk about enough. Women spend an extraordinary amount of time and money managing paperwork created by life's transitions. Marriage licenses, court orders, divorce decrees, name change documents. And I don't know about where you live, but in North Carolina, that costs at minimum $125. Birth certificates, death certificates. The emotional work of these transitions is already significant. But then there's the administrative work, the filing, the updating, the approving, And if any document is missing, the burden falls on the woman to reconstruct her own history. Not because she isn't who she says she is, but because the piece of paper is missing from a file cabinet somewhere. So what about divorce? Let's talk about divorced women for a minute, because I think this is where the conversation gets especially important. Divorce is often discussed as a legal process, but for many women, it's also a survival process. A woman leaving an unhealthy, controlling, or abusive marriage may spend years rebuilding her life, years creating distance, years establishing safety, years reclaiming herself and her identity. Now, imagine being asked repeatedly to produce records tying you back to that chapter of your life again and again to prove who you are today. The question isn't whether documentation matters. The question is whether the burden should fall equally on everyone, or whether some people must continuously revisit painful chapters simply to access the rights others exercise more freely. Who gets to have a simple identity? There is an assumption built into many systems that identity is fixed, that the name on your birth certificate should easily connect to the name you use today. And for many men, that assumption holds true. For many women, life creates a different reality. Marriage changes a name. Divorce changes a name. Remarriage changes a name. Adoption changes a name. Cultural traditions change a name. Professional decisions change a name. The very milestones society celebrates often create more complicated documentation trails for women. So here's the deeper question. Are we unintentionally penalizing people for ordinary lives? Fairness is the argument. Now let's be fair. There is another side to this conversation. And many Americans believe that protecting the integrity of elections is extremely important. In fact, 83% of Americans of all persuasions believe that voter ID and argue that that citizenship should be verified. They argue that proof should be required, and they argue that everyone should meet the same standards. And those concerns need to be heard. After all, confidence in democratic systems matter, election integrity matters, public trust matters, but fairness requires another question. Even when a rule is technically applied equally, does it affect everyone equally? This is the core behind the disparate impact theory that you hear me talk about on the channel. Because equal rules and equal outcomes are not always the same thing. Think about the women who may not have an organized binder of important documents. The woman moves repeatedly. The woman whose home is destroyed by a flood or a fire or a hurricane or a tornado. the woman who is escaping domestic violence, the elderly widow who married 60 years ago in, in rural Alabama and lives in a northern state, women whose county records are difficult to access. The county records may have been flooded away in a storm. The woman caring for children, parents, and everyone else before herself, and has just lost track of who she is and where her paperwork is. These women are not exceptions. They are the rule. They are America. And when discussions focus only on legal requirements, we risk overlooking the human beings navigating those requirements. At the heart of this conversation is not really paperwork. It's about identity. Who gets believed? Who must prove themselves? Who bear additional hurdles? And whether our systems recognize that women's lives often include more documented transitions than men's. A woman can be a daughter, a wife, a former wife, a widow, a survivor, a professional, a caregiver, a mother, a leader. And through all these changes, she remains the same citizen, the same person, the same human being deserving of equal treatment under the law. So I'm going to leave you with this question where we started with. When a woman's identity changes through marriage, divorce, remarriage, or survival, should she bear a greater documentation burden to exercise her right to vote? This is not a political question, it's a human question. And perhaps an invitation for all of us to think about whether our systems were designed around the real lives or around idealized paperwork. It's clear that this law was written from a male perspective because for men, it's easy. Show your birth certificate, show your ID. But for women, it's much more complicated. And if you are a viewer right now, has a name change ever complicated your life? Are you prepared if the SAVE Act passes to be able to get your paperwork? Will it be expensive for you? Does the law allow for free documents and free paperwork? We're going to continue this conversation. I see that Mark Lee is in the room, and I'm going to invite him to come and talk to me about the SAVE Act, and we're going to talk about some other issues later on. How you doing, Mark? Can't hear you. Uh, Yeah, I got you now.
All right. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. There's
Good. I
been so
understand
much going.
the Save Act is crazy because now you ladies will have to go back to like those that are married, go back to their find their birth certificates and all this other kind of craziness. It sounds like it just doesn't make much sense at all. But it's another attempt to roll back the hands of time.
Hmm. And a lot of come on in, William. We're gonna be talking next up. Um, we're gonna be, you know, the SAVE Act. There are a lot of Republican politicians, including J.D. Vance and others, that say that women shouldn't have the right to vote at all.
Wow.
And and um, and so, with that in mind, how do we this is their effort to do it without having to go through constitutional changes. They're going to
Right.
disenfranchise a whole lot of, and the women who are good, women with means, okay, are going to be okay, right? I'm going to be okay. I got a passport,
Hmm.
But only 49% of Americans have passports.
Right.
Okay, and you know that a disproportionate number of those people that don't have passports are women,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Uh, the cost, if you get a divorce in North Carolina, and I know this because my daughter went through it, and you want to change your name, you have to pay the court filing fee, which is what, $125
Yep.
to file to change your name back. How many, you already went through a divorce,
Hmm.
your assets are depleted. How many low income and moderate income women who were able to get divorces can afford the $125 name change? Not many.
Not many though.
And so there, those women who are registered to vote are going to have to spend money to prove who they are, because the divorce decree is not sufficient. Under the SAVE Act as it's written, it's just terrible.
It's crazy.
And so we're going to be tracking this throughout. It's currently being tucked into the budget,
Mm.
and the House passed it, including it in the budget resolution. Now, they don't have the votes on the Senate side. There are a number of Republican senators that won't support it. And I think they have to have 60 votes, and I don't think they are going to come close to that.
Oh,
But the problem is they keep attaching it as a poison pill to bills that everybody wants to pass, right? And so, are you not going to pass? Are you going to sacrifice this to protect a woman's right to vote, right?
mm.
Um, and then I talk about this from the perspective of all women, because the impact is on all women, but there's also a racial and cultural component that intensifies it, because in the Hispanic culture, when you marry, you combine the names to make a new name. And
Right.
in some other cultures, the naming convention doesn't reflect your husband's name or your name. It's a cultural thing. And then for black women, it becomes an economic problem in terms of, can we afford, those of us who are the most likely voters that are my age and older. I know my mom, her birth certificate is a Bible.
Wow.
And in the rural South, there is no birth certificate for people who are 80 and older. Their names are written in a Bible. So how do you, if you're 91 and you've always voted, but now you've got to show that you were married, and your birth certificate is not a birth certificate, but it's your family Bible, how does that work?
Mm.
Because of segregation, we're lucky, Mark, because we live in Durham and we had Lincoln Hospital, right?
Right.
We had a hospital to be born in,
Hmm.
to get a birth certificate from. But if you were in rural Bertie or Gates County, you didn't have that luxury. All you had was a midwife and uh, a Bible,
Hmm.
and that goes for people who were our age.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? So there are
Definitely.
a lot of and who is the most highest voting population amongst African Americans? It's African American women,
African American women.
and it's African American women of a certain age.
Hmm.
And this is a double, triple whammy, because do we have the paperwork? I'm gonna tell you right now, if TC wasn't so meticulous about paperwork, I wouldn't know where none of my documents were.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know where their paperwork is.
I hadn't seen my birth. I hadn't seen my so. We had to get our passports. I had to go and I had to pay to find my passport, my birth certificate. Um, it was in Springfield, Massachusetts, where I
Hmm.
was born. And then I found out that the name I thought was my name wasn't my name the whole time.
Oh wow.
Because the name on the birth certificate was spelled differently from the way we had been spelling it. My sister is the same way. Um, she grew up as Ramona Jones, but her birth certificate says she's Ramonia
Hmm.
Jones. Now, even though she hasn't changed her name, right? But her whole life, all her professional documents, her her high school diploma, her college diploma, all her professional paperwork says Ramona.
Hmm.
And only when we went to get a passport did we find out that her name is Ramonia.
Wow.
So even though she still will have the same thing, but how do you prove? Well, how do you prove that's me, right? Because she doesn't have a single document in life that says Ramonia except her birth certificate.
Hmm.
And that was a mistake made by a clerk during marriage. So that's the interesting thing. Um, we're gonna keep watching the Save Act, but I have invited William to come and give us an update on the Nolan Wells case. And show you. I'm gonna show you a video um, while we set that up. So give me a moment to share my screen.
Yeah.
I'm showing a video of the DA in the Nolan Wells case, and then I'm gonna have William join us for an update on this case.
Speaking of updates, I did have a question to ask you because I know we talk about racism and racism it impacts us, but it doesn't just impact us because I was reading an article that you would find interesting, Stella and everything like that. But apparently, even though he just helped them win the championship, the star Yamal is getting a lot of racial flack and everything like that. So he returned to Spain, a world champion, but it's been marked by racist abuse from some of the very fans celebrating the country's victory. Because apparently, because he's of Moroccan descent, there are people chanting Moro and Fora Moro and Noe es Espanol and all along those lines. So they're basically calling the question his even having a Spanish background, even though he is plainly born in Spain and plainly has some other things in that space. And apparently, he'd been subjected to abuse earlier in the tournament after performing the Muslim prostate, prostration or sajad while celebrating his goal against Saudi Arabia and everything like that. So there have been some chants and everything like that. There's even some chants that apparently a teenage protege was on the pitch as sections of the RCDA Stadium crowd saying whoever does not jump is a Muslim, with the chant heard repeatedly during the first half. And he acknowledged that the abuse was aimed at Egypt rather than him, but personally, he refused to brush it aside. He said using religion as something to mock people in a football stadium leaves you as ignorant and racist people, he wrote on social media per The Athletic. So this racism thing doesn't just exist in our country, it exists in other countries as well.
Yeah, the World Cup was a mess. And yeah, the World Cup, Mbappe from England, oh my goodness, he had a pure legislator from Paraguay just calling him all out his name to
Yeah.
the point that the UN had to step in. So not just the football world, but the UN and the country had to disavow her because, and she doubled down. She did not back down. And called it, and again called him out his name. And the Argentinians, they're just bad boys. Okay, they were just bad boys, and I'm waiting to see what the FIFA does to punish them for all of the misdeeds that they did, both racial um, and political, that they brought into the game. And then, you don't have no respect for you. They lost that game. Okay, they got their behinds beat.
Yep, they
Beat.
lost that game.
They lost that game. And I guess they're of the philosophy, we lost the game, but we ain't gonna lose the fight. So at the end, they started throwing punches. That's crazy.
It was just
And
crazy,
then,
exactly.
and then to be so disrespectful that they turned their backs during the ceremony on Spain, and it's breaking my heart that Lamine Yamal is going through all this. What should be triumphant, he's going home and having to face this kind of abuse, because that young boy is just amazing.
Well,
It's
he's
just
definitely, I mean,
amazing.
he's amazing. And a lot of people are upset because he will probably take the mantle from Messi, and not saying anything against Messi, but he's just amazing. And at such a young age to have those kind of skill sets and everything like that. But yeah, he's truly an amazing player. So he definitely, I'm looking for him to have a long career. I mean, a lot of times soccer, even though it's an aggressive, uh, strenuous sport, it is very much a sport that you can have a long life. I think Pelé was in it for decades, and I expect that Yamal will be in there for decades as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more, but I want to get to this segment because I know you probably have a lot to say about the Nolan Wells case as well. This morning, the DA released this message, and then I'm gonna have William join us in the discussion about all the updates that have happened with Nolan Wells this week.
Reported missing. Local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have worked around the clock investigating what happened to him. Every piece of evidence must be examined. Every credible lead must be followed to its conclusion. Every witness interview must be analyzed in the context of all other evidence. The pressure for answers does not change what the work requires. Our responsibility to Nolan and our community is to complete this investigation thoroughly, carefully, without compromise, supported by the evidence, and worthy of the confidence of the people we serve. I also understand that many people have questions about why more information has not been released publicly. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict the information a prosecutor can release during an investigation. Our restraint in communicating facts and evidence is not an effort to keep the truth from the public. It is an effort to protect the integrity of this investigation and the grand jury proceeding. As your district attorney, I have an ethical obligation to avoid public statements that could influence witnesses, prejudice the proceeding, or compromise the fairness of the legal process. My obligation extends to and requires me to use reasonable care to ensure investigating agencies avoid making those statements and releasing information as well. These rules exist to protect the search for the truth, not to prevent it. As divided as the discussion surrounding Nolan's death has become, I know we all want the same thing: to understand what happened to Nolan. With that being our shared goal, we must also share in the goal of protecting the integrity of how the truth is discovered. If we sacrifice the integrity of the process in effort to satisfy today's questions, we risk undermining the confidence in tomorrow's answers. When the public asks, what about this, or have they looked at that, or did they think about this? The answer is yes. Those are the same questions investigators ask. The difference is that we can't publicly discuss the evidence, the interviews, or what those efforts have uncovered while the investigation is underway. Again, our restraint in sharing details of the investigation is not a refusal to share the truth. It is our commitment to protect the process that allows the truth to be known with confidence. There's a lot of information out there, and there is a heck of a lot of misinformation out there. I simply want the community I serve to know that this investigation is being handled with the care, professionalism, and commitment to the truth that every family in Jackson County deserves. As we continue this important work, Nolan's family, his friends, and all who loved him remain in our prayers.
Yeah, that case is a mess.
Yeah, William, update us on what's been going on this week and say hi to Mark.
Well, hello, Mark.
How you doing?
Doing all right. The main update coming out this week is the family requested and received a second independent autopsy of Nolan Wells's body. And their attorney, Ben Crump, held a press conference where he discussed the findings of the autopsy. What the autopsy showed that had not previously been disclosed by the current autopsy that's ongoing in Mississippi is he found, one, that there was a reddish area underneath the back of the skull that he could not explain. Again, the body has decomposed as time has progressed, and this is the second autopsy, so he's receiving it after the first. So he can't identify any bruises or lacerations currently. And what many have stated is the reddened area at the back of the skull could be both the result of blunt force trauma, but also be a result of simply blood pooling at the back base of the skull due to being placed on the surgical table multiple times. So just in transport of the body, this could be a result, but it also could be a result he can't identify. What he also noted is that the area at the front of Nolan's neck was not present when he conducted the second autopsy. It is remained with the Mississippi coroner's office. And because of that, he cannot rule out damage to the neck or strangulation as a cause of death. He is still unable to identify a cause of death. He is unsure. The only signs that he saw, the second autopsy coroner, was the reddish area at the back of the head and the missing area of the throat, which, if the original autopsy in Mississippi felt the need to remove and examine that, could potentially lead to strangulation and or damage to the throat as a potential cause of death. But as of right now, it is inconclusive, but it's uncomfortable is what I'll say. And so the family release of this, I think the main thing to take away, at least for now, is there's no identifiable cause of death that disproves foul play, right? I believe if the cause of death was drowning, that would have already been identified and revealed, because there are signs of drowning. If the cause of death were anything at this point, non-questionable, it would have been revealed at this point. But other than the toxicology report that is out, we still have no ground on which this young man died. And it further leads to the actions of his friends afterwards being questionable. So that is the main thing, is that the family has performed a second autopsy. And that identifies no clear passive or logical cause of death, right? No snake bite, no right? So there's no injury, but there's also no like heart condition identified, nothing that would assuage people's fears and concerns about what happened.
Yeah, I was watching Nancy Grace last night, and she had a fairly media renowned pathologist on the show, and he said that the pathologist that conducted the second autopsy was highly respected, and that he had done a more thorough autopsy than is generally conducted. He was like, he was meticulous, and that the fact that the red pattern, the bruise pattern on the back of the head was the only bruise pattern on the body, that's not how blood pools. If it was the blood pooling, it would have showed up in other areas.
It would have been systemic.
So he said that was of concern. He said that it's not uncommon for the throat area, those things, to stay with the first autopsy. But the lungs were not given over, and that's where, if there's water in the lungs, and that there's one thing they can do with the blood to look for diatoms.
Yeah.
And so that's what people are looking at. And so, and then there's a timeline, and I was looking to see if I could find a picture of it, but there's a timeline of the boat, GPS of the boat, that doesn't make sense when you put it with the request for, they sent out a SOS, a distress call, saying they were sinking. And the sea taxi that was be dispatched to go and pick up the thing, they got the call, and then they got another call about 10 minutes later saying, don't worry about it, we've got it under control. So who was it that the public is asking, who towed the boat, what was going on with the boat? But then the guy from another interesting fact that's out here in the internet is that a guy from the Cajun Navy told Nancy Grace that they offered to use a cadaver dog on the boat, and that for the family, and that they were turned down. That doesn't mean the family didn't do it, but they didn't use their dog, which was conveniently there. There's a lot of distrust in the community.
Yeah.
A lot. I don't understand. There seems to be a gag about the parents, the influence of the parents of the boys. We're talking about a judge, a doctor, and a prominent lawyer, I believe.
Yes.
And
It is clear that the family of the boys, as of right now, is keeping them lawyered up and quiet.
and if you were my child,
Yeah,
you would be lawyered up and quiet. I ain't
Yeah.
mad at them about that.
but that
Oh,
They-
does
you
not-
talking about the parents of the
of
kids
the
that he
other-
that Nolan was hanging out
Yeah.
with?
But
Yeah.
that does not assuage the fears of the public
No,
about
it's-
what has happened.
No, it should not assuage the fear, but I'm not going.
Yeah, no,
I'm
I'm
not
pointing
going
out.
to hate on the parents, and I'm not going to put any.
No, that was my point as well. Is
Yeah.
that they are not malicious. They are just keeping keeping their children out of the spotlight and keeping them lawyered up and quiet so they do not incriminate themselves.
And I'm not mad at the parents about that. Where I do have concerns is about those hours in between when Nolan was lost and when his mother retrieved the phone. There's some concerns about the phone, but we shouldn't be just talking about Nolan's phone. They ought to be. What I haven't seen is any kind of search warrants or anything, or that have been made public, because a search warrant is a public document. But if they voluntarily gave the phones as part of the investigation, they voluntarily gave their phones to the police, which if you're lawyered up, you shouldn't do. But I mean, I'm just saying. Their phones had just as much evidence as Nolan's phone does, and maybe more, because it would show different conversations. The prosecutor, her statement is appropriate, but her statement should have been made 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I agree.
Not-
The present, yeah, not now and everything like that. What is your speculation? Because I know a lot of people are thinking that the folks must have been hiding something, and I mean, we do know that college kids, and I was a college kid a long time ago, 40 years ago, and everything like that, that they do go out and have parties, and they do like to get out and having that Animal House kind of mentality and all along those lines. I think that I told, and I'll tell William this, he'll get a big kick out of this. I actually lived in an Animal House environment my last semester in college because I was a smart person going to college because I was smart enough to get housing every year that I was there, except for the last semester because I wasn't sure I was going the last semester. So I actually went to the university and didn't have any plans. Fortunately, Danny Hermosillo, a good friend of mine, and he's still involved in media and public relations, said, I have a solution because I had my courses, but I didn't have a place to stay. And he's like, you can stay with us. It's a white fraternity house. So I lived in a white fraternity house for my senior year and everything like that. So it was like literally like living in Animal House and everything like that. So fortunately, I just was trying to get that last semester in. I won't try to join their parties and everything along those lines. But it was an experience. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, when I was 17, I was part of the National Science Foundation summer camp. It was held on Bennett's campus, but it was the people, the majority of the people who were in that camp were not people of color, if you understand what I'm saying. And that was my first experience living with a group of non-melanated people it was a different experience.
Stella, those could be different experiences because the first time I learned about that was I went to a party, and William, you might get a kick out of this as well. But speaking of Nolan, what he was going through and hanging out with a certain crowd of people. But I remember I went to a party and I saw a lot of people running into each other, and they were singing like they were having a good old time. And I'm going like, I don't know what y'all are doing. Y'all look like y'all in warfare, but that was when slam dancing was popular
Slam dancing,
and everything like that. So they were literally running into each other, and that was mostly people that were not melanated. You know, you run into somebody in the streets and you try to bump into them, you might be headed to a fight and all along those lines. So we weren't trying to do too much fight.
It's a very different culture.
Yeah.
But I will say that I think there are three outcomes.
Right.
Okay. One, there's a conflict between who he left with, or who was he left on the island alone, or was he left on the island with someone, and did he leave the island? So there's that scenario. So each of those scenarios has both a non-nefarious and a nefarious thing. And we got to remember we're talking about 17 to 21-year-old people. So you got to have a mindset of fun and done. What I hope is the most what I hope happened in the outcome is that Nolan accidentally fell, hit his head, drowned,
Hmm.
and the kids panicked
Right.
and didn't weren't able to save him, but then started panicking. Oh my God, we were drinking. Oh my God, we got drugs out here. Oh my God, what's gonna happen? And they panicked and left him.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping happened too, because that is
I
very
mean,
possible.
to me, that's the most likely to happen.
No, I agree, because I remember there was a young gentleman here. He was actually connected to Central, and that's what happened to him, because he was at a pond. I can't remember if he was swimming or he was fishing or what he was doing, but he had a epileptic attack, and during that epileptic attack is when he drowned. He was actually a friend of mine, and actually you probably know the friend because there's Irvin Truitt, who's gone through some health issues and all along his lines. But it was when his friend passed away, and this was decades ago, and all along those lines. But I remember the story I had heard was that he definitely had like epilepsy, and he had one of those epileptic attacks. And you know that you have those attacks, sometimes you are not able to have as much control as we would like to have, and all in that line. So that is why he met an unfortunate death and all along those lines. But I mean, it's just one of those things that happens health-wise. So I'm with you. I'm hoping that if something like that happened with Nolan, whether it was something that was health-related or whether it was something that was unrelated to the health. But I do know that that happened to a gentleman here not that long ago.
The other another scenario, a possibility, and I don't want to stir up things, but I believe the young woman that he was showing some interest in was non-melanated, and there could have been some people on the island, not Nolan's friends, that took umbrage with that conversation and may have acted. That's the other end of the spectrum, right? But the island festivities do not suggest that there was intent to
Right.
harm. I don't
Right.
see intent to harm. I do see a lot of evidence of cover up.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think there's a lot of evidence to cover up and a lot of evidence that
Yeah.
they were
It's,
trying to hide.
and you know, I worked in the court system, and I have seen that a lot of convictions are not for the crime, but the cover up. It's the
No,
cover up that
no.
that gets most people in trouble. It's because the cover up is easy to prove, and the crime may be difficult to prove. But
Yeah.
it's
And like
so
I said, and we know that the legal system has its moments and everything like that. Because I know that long time ago, this was another one of a long time ago stories, like a few decades ago, me and my brother got in the trouble and everything along those lines. But you'll never find that in our records because we got it expunged because we were trying to. There was some people that were trying to see a young lady. You know, sometimes at Central there can be some strict enforcement. At least there used to be back in the day in terms of who can visit who, and we were trying to get the
see,
person in to see the young lady and all along
and
those
later
lines.
on,
And then we got into like some scrap and a little bit of fight, and law came and got involved. So we basically got busted, and we got to go to the court, and the court said, if y'all do community service, this record will disappear. So we did community service, and like I said, you'll never see records of what happened because it was expunged. But that's because we had a good lawyer. We had one of the Mashawks that helped us out in that particular case.
Um, yes, the system, especially when your parents are part of the system can protect. Um,
Yes.
the punishment is still there, but there was an incident in my youth where someone thought that the person involved was my brother. It
Hmm.
turned out it wasn't my brother, but a friend of his. But they were like frickin' frat. You saw one, you saw the other, so there was no way that the officer who arrested him for switching out a pair of sneakers.
Right.
Um, and but my mom, when she saw him, she beat him. She gave him a beating like he was in fact my brother. And he did. There was no formal community service back in the day when we were growing up.
Yeah.
But the storekeeper said if he comes and cleans the store for a month and works for me for free, basically for a month, I'll let everything go and it's okay, ma'am. Don't. It's okay. But when my mom got home and told the other parents, every boy of a certain age in the neighborhood got beaten that night. Okay,
Hmm.
every
Oh yeah.
boy, because it turned out he wasn't the only one. It was like some kind of game or something that we're doing. But no, there was community service
Yeah.
for real back
Yeah.
then.
There was real community service, and there was that notion of, as my brother used to put it, and some of my other friends put it, you weren't just gonna get punished by one neighbor; you were gonna get punished by
It
the
was
whole
by the whole
neighborhood
thing.
before you even got home and everything like that. So your
And
butt
and
might
I
be a little
think
bit on the sore side before you even got home.
and I think we've got something like that going on where the community cares about Nolan and his family. That the funeral showed that genuine concern of the community for Nolan and his family.
Yes.
That genuine concern. I think that there has been some demonstrated concern by a couple of the boys.
Yeah. No.
The one who first asked Nolan's mother had Nolan gotten home.
Right.
Um, there are at least two that have made some some of their actions showed concern.
No, that's really
I think,
that's
and I think that whatever happened,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
more the cover up than the crime, or if there is even a crime, it's
Yeah,
more
it's
the
more of a
cover
cover
up
up and everything like that.
than
I did have a
anything
quick
like
question
that.
before you end for William and everything along those lines. It's not so much about Nolan, but it is about security and all along those lines. Because there had been a lot of racist and even racial attacks that had hit our HBCU universities, and I know that you've got some associations with some of those universities, William, and everything like that. So, is there still a concern both about the voting terror? Because we were talking about earlier about the SAVE Act, but also the targeted approaches in some of our communities, whether that's North Carolina Central, whether that's Shaw, whether that's St. Aug, or whether that's some of our other HBCUs. Because I do remember that that took place a few months ago, but I've heard it kind of died down. But I'm thinking that as my nephew is off, about to go off to UNCG, it's not an HBCU, but it's around the corner from A&T. I was wondering if that is still a concern that you are hearing from young people. I know that you're not necessarily college age or older, but you still have your ear to the ground with some of those young people that are college age and everything like that. So I just wonder your thoughts as to whether there's just concern about attacks on our HBCU campuses, and because there have been like even some bombing threats a few months ago and all along those lines. So what is
So,
our thoughts?
so what had initially happened was, and a lot of this was in the wake of the killing of Charlie Kirk, was there were threats made against HBCUs and black universities, and there were targeted people showing up as well, and so I know there was a police response. Following that, there were several moves by right-wing podcasters or political organizations to hold campus talks and campus tours on HBCUs. I know Candace Owens had created some sort of black conservative movement that were going to hit all the HBCUs and bring conservative talking points to HBCUs and try to debate the students at the HBCUs. It was called Blexit, and that's the organization name. It's under Turning Point USA, and their whole thing is they want to try to sneak into HBCUs with black conservatives spouting conservative propaganda. So they want into HBCUs as they want into all black spaces. There are still sporadic attempts at black churches. I think the most recent few have been fended off by armed security at the church, but there are still sporadic attempts to shoot at black churches.
Yeah.
And so there's still threat of organized harm against the black community. I think currently a lot of the big attention is directed at immigration. And again, they had a counter protest to the memorial of the man who was shot by ICE I want to say a week ago, right? Like it's literally his memorial, his vigil, where people are coming to visit the family, and there are people counter protesting the vigil from across the street. And so I think that's where, but as I documented the other times, Nolan Wells unfortunately is not the only black person. He's just the one that has gripped the country, but there are several others that happened roughly within the same 2-week span who also died on boats and died in the river, which is why there's online memories of like, is this like a thing, a white supremacist thing? Because how does this happen several times in several different states, all within the same time frame? There are a lot of black people coming out hung, all in different states, all within the same year, all treated as suicides, even though that's not really a thing we do. And so there's a lot, again, we're the #1 victims of hate crimes. There are a lot of hate crimes happening that aren't being charged as hate crimes. They lower the charges to the lowest they possibly can for everyone else when they commit crimes against black people. And so that's why there's a healthy bit of skepticism about these reports that come out.
That makes a lot of sense and everything like that. Because I heard somewhere, maybe you can correct me, Stella, but I heard that in terms of missing women, that there are a lot of black women that are missing, and that is actually underreported and everything like that. We do know that there's a lot of human trafficking, but I understand that there's a lot of black women that are part of the disappearance crisis, and this was something that came out last year and everything along those lines. But I don't know if you heard anything about this, where there's this whole case of a lot of.
There's a lot of black women who disappeared, and there are also indigenous women. There are so many indigenous women that have disappeared that it's like a percentage.
Yes.
It has reached like a percentage of the population. That many indigenous women have disappeared. The black women that have disappeared um, is a concern. It's a concern about who's reported as who's being trafficked.
Right.
And then a lot of fear has been generated when you find out when the Epstein files um, erupted with the kind of perversions that people found out were actually real things that
Yeah.
happened.
Mm-hmm.
People began to wonder what happened to the disappeared women, especially the young women.
Yeah. Hey,
Um,
Stella, just really quickly, along those same lines, I'm seeing this article in Psychology Today, and this was back from in March. That said that black children account for about 37% of missing cases, but receive far less media coverage, and
yes.
adultification bias causes black girls to be perceived as older and less innocent. So there's also a bias that exists because of the way that folks develop and all along those lines. So it says psychology research shows empathy is often stronger for perceived in-group members, but they do look like that's a decent amount of folks because black children are accounting for 37% of the
Thirty-seven
missing.
percent of the people who are missing,
Yes.
but they're not 37% of the black population.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, um, but yes, and the mm, Nolan Wells getting the kind of publicity that he has. It took mainstream media. The black community's been on the case from day two.
Yeah.
From
Right.
the day his body was discovered.
Yes.
Right.
The black community, black media, all our top black, he's been number one with a bullet from July 6th.
Oh yeah. He's definitely been.
Mainstream media picked up initially the white version of, oh, they're so sad, but he just drowned, right?
He just
That was the
drowned.
first reporting, and then that was it. It wasn't until this week that mainstream media like Good Morning America and the CNN and the other mainstream media picked up the story as a concern, as a mystery that needs to be resolved.
No,
And
definitely
but they're late to the party, but they're at the party, so that's a good thing. Now keep the pressure on.
keep the
But
pressure
that,
on. Definitely got to keep the pressure on. Speaking of keeping the
but
pressure on,
like William said, there were 24 incidents, and it's
Mhm.
only this one that's getting any attention.
Yeah.
man, that's my
And
point. There's got to be more attention given to more people and all along those lines. But I did have another question, just really quickly, and I know you're winding down, telling everything like that. But I was doing some, I won't say grading, but some judging of some musicians, and one of the musicians was actually a hip hop artist, and they were trying to do a hip hop song that was going kind of saluted to what Leo was doing when he used that term "dope" and tried to make it a hip term, and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take on that because I did not give it a good voice because I thought that it might be causing too much of an issue if they're going to be hyping the term dope as a positive term and not a negative term, and all along those lines. So yeah, there's some hip hop artists that have tried to take his term and make it into a hip hop song lyric.
you know, actually, dope has always been a slang for cool,
Right.
even back in my day. So I don't have a problem with them. I think there's a youth movement that's saying Durham is dope,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's like a thing out here in these streets. So
And
I'm
that's
I'm
that's kind of what Larry, I mean, not Larry, Leo was doing, was he was using that as a city slogan. And I
yeah.
do know he got
So
some pushback from some people like the late minister Paul Scott and some others that gave him some pushback because they felt that it was too derogatory a term and was not should have been used in another way.
and again, slang slang changes, meanings change. Um, so I'm not too I'm not too messed up about that.
Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
now that I got you here,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a slam in August. We're
Okay.
gonna have guests. It's gonna be Black August.
Black August. Black August in the park.
Yep. So we're gonna have Black August. I can't name names today because I gotta firm it up, but I'm planning on having a two-time Grammy nominated personality on in August to talk about their ice cream.
Okay.
I know you know.
Yeah.
And John DeBerry is going to come back on to talk about his health products with Bird Dog. Um,
Okay.
and I'm trying to get a former congressman who's got his autobiography coming out. If the book comes out, where I can read it before the end of the month, I'm trying to get him on the show.
Okay.
And then I've got space for I'm recruiting one other person to come on, but we're gonna have guests every week in August, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, August sounds great and everything like that. Maybe we can get the Ochellas on because I know that Karen's back in town, and of course Moses is one of the organizers of Black August in the Park. So maybe we can get them on.
Yeah, maybe we get them to come and tell us all about Black August in the Park. That'd be great. So I'm looking forward to August. I'm also gonna head out to New Orleans
Okay.
and spend a couple of days down there training folks on disaster recovery, and then but we'll have weekly updates from William on all things
Oh yeah.
that he's going to be our correspondent kind of for those things.
Because I
Um,
know William giving us a lot about the elections because we got midterms coming up too, and the midterms are just
and
around the
William,
corner.
yeah, William will be. Um, Everything's still unsettled about what we actually have to do and what we can and can't do. And I'll have Melissa. I'm just saying it out here in the atmosphere, Melissa. Melissa Crone,
Mhm.
you're gonna be on the show. You don't know it, but you're gonna be on the show next month.
Questions about doing what?
The election. You're gonna be doing your Nolan
Okay.
and you're
Oh,
gonna
this
be
is
on
Thomas
the
thing. Okay.
Black Beat, and then Thomas is gonna. Oh, I said William, but I meant Thomas.
Gotcha.
That makes
Thomas
sense.
is gonna give us some election stats and facts.
Yeah.
And he's gonna run those numbers for us from the time early vote starts until early vote ends. We're gonna have weekly updates on how black folks are doing in terms of turnout.
Cool.
Um, so it's gonna be an exciting fall.
Hmm.
Um, and oh look, I haven't used it yet, but I've got like a professional riggy thing.
Yeah. Cool. Yep.
And
You're scaling up.
I'm gonna be scaling up. So I
Yep.
got my microphone, but I don't have the what is it, the lighting thing,
Right.
and I'm gonna get me like, man, they are like beating people in the streets. I might get me a pair of those Kardashian glasses.
Right. I heard about those. Yeah, I heard about those.
And when I'm out here in these streets.
So what you said is you might walk up to a one of them redneck Klansmen and let them and talk to them and get them recorded by the Kardashian glasses when he not know he's being recorded.
I might get me a pair. They actually look cute, but I think though that if I'm wearing them, I'm gonna have like a little notice that
Yeah.
that you may be recorded. So let me know if you don't want to.
Yeah, because there have been a couple
Um,
people that have caught up in that. I was watching something on, I think it was TikTok, where people were being recorded and didn't know they were being recorded and everything
yeah,
like that.
I'm not gonna do that. But I'm not gonna be out here in these streets being antagonized by folks who don't believe in my opinions,
Exactly.
and not have their names and faces documented.
Exactly.
So I don't have them, people, but I might get me a pair. So if you see me in anything that looks like cool shades, know that.
Yep.
But
Ooh.
I will be disclosing. I would never record anybody
Oh yeah.
without disclosing it.
Right. Cool. Well, another powerful show. As always, you do a great job and everything along those lines. A couple of weeks that I was checking after the show, I was like, she didn't record this week. But for the most part, you've been keeping things rolling and everything like that. But yeah, I'll send you the
Yeah,
August links later on. But no. Huh?
summertime, I took a couple of weeks off for
Oh yeah, you gotta do that.
some
You gotta,
family things.
you gotta have family
Usually
time.
I
Gotta
try
have.
to, if I miss a Friday, I do try to catch it on that Saturday.
Right.
But
I did see that.
But yeah, I'm telling you now, audience, next month is going to be action packed with guest spots every week, and it's gonna be broad range. It's gonna be um, broad range, but we're gonna be focusing on Black power and Black leadership in the economic field. I want to thank you all for your attention. Um, we will keep our eye on the SAVE Act. I'm also going to next week talk to you and just catch you up on some things that have happened in the state legislature. And we will continue with updates on the Nolan Wells case. So thank you for watching this week's issue of Doing Justice Brings Joy.